If you're enjoying stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more captivating narratives that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's dive into today's story. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of Manhattan's elite. Emily Parker sat alone at table 23, absently tracing the rim of her champagne flute with her fingertip. As a financial journalist for the Wall Street Journal, she was accustomed to observing the wealthy rather than mingling with them. The wedding of Senator Williams' daughter had drawn every important name in New York, and Emily had secured an invitation through a college connection. Research for a piece she was writing on wealth disparity, she'd told herself. Her emerald green dress, the most expensive item in her wardrobe, suddenly felt inadequate among the designer gowns that floated through the ballroom like exotic birds. She glanced at her watch. 9:37. Early enough to slip away without seeming rude, late enough to have gathered sufficient material for her article. As Emily reached for her clutch, a shadow fell across the table. "Pretend you're with me." The voice was deep, authoritative, the kind that expected immediate compliance. Emily looked up into the face of James Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Financial Group and one of New York's most eligible bachelors. His steel-gray eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. "Excuse me?" Emily managed, her journalist's composure momentarily shaken. James Blackwood slid into the empty chair beside her, his custom tuxedo whispering of wealth and privilege. Up close, his features were even more striking than they appeared in financial magazines. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw perpetually tensed, as if bracing for conflict, and dark hair with a single silver streak at the temple. "Cynthia Rothschild is approaching," he said under his breath. "She's been trying to set me up with her daughter for 3 years. Please, just for 5 minutes." Before Emily could respond, his hand covered hers on the table, warm, confident, slightly calloused in a way that surprised her. For a man who moved billions with the tap of a keyboard, his touch felt unexpectedly human. "James, darling." A woman draped in diamonds approached their table, her smile fixed with surgical precision. "I've been looking for you all evening." "Cynthia." He nodded politely, his thumb absently stroking the back of Emily's hand. "I've been catching up with Emily." "Have you met?" Emily straightened her shoulders, summoning her best impression of belonging in this rarefied air. "Lovely to meet you." Cynthia's gaze swept over Emily with practiced assessment. "And how do you two know each other?" Before Emily could fabricate a response, James squeezed her hand gently. "Emily and I met at the Economic Forum in Davos last winter. We've been inseparable since." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, making Emily wonder how often he'd deployed similar falsehoods. As a journalist who trafficked in truths, even uncomfortable ones, she felt a reflexive resistance, yet also an unexpected thrill at being cast in this impromptu performance. "How fascinating," Cynthia replied, her smile cooling several degrees. "Madeline will be so disappointed. She's just finished her MBA at Wharton, you know." "Send her my congratulations," James replied smoothly. After a few more minutes of stilted conversation, Cynthia drifted away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and palpable disappointment. James immediately released Emily's hand and leaned back in his chair. "Thank you. I owe you one." "That's it?" Emily raised an eyebrow. 5 minutes of hand-holding and now we part ways? Strangers once more?" A hint of a smile touched his lips, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "Would you prefer I make a more dramatic exit? Perhaps sweep you onto the dance floor for one memorable waltz before disappearing into the night? I'd prefer to know why James Blackwood, who has faced down hostile takeovers and congressional hearings without flinching, needs a shield against a socialite with matrimonial ambitions." He studied her for a moment, reassessing. "You know who I am. I'm a financial journalist. Your company's recent acquisition of Meridian Technologies made quite a splash." Something shifted in his expression, a guard coming up. And now I've given you something more interesting to write about than Senator Williams' daughter's wedding cake. Actually, Emily replied, gathering her clutch, I find corporate acquisitions far more interesting than society weddings or the romantic entanglements of Manhattan's elite. As she stood to leave, his hand caught her wrist. Gentle, but insistent. Wait, I didn't catch your full name. That's because I didn't give it. She smiled, enjoying the rare feeling of having the upper hand with someone like him. Emily Parker, The Wall Street Journal. Recognition flashed in his eyes. You wrote the exposé on insider trading at Goldman Sachs last year. I did. That was thorough work. I'm nothing if not thorough, Mr. Blackwood. She slipped her wrist from his grasp. Enjoy the rest of your evening. As Emily walked away, she could feel his eyes following her. What she couldn't know was that their impromptu 5-minute charade would soon evolve into something far more complex, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about James Blackwood and about herself. 3 weeks later, Emily was hunched over her laptop in the Journal's open plan office when her phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Emily Parker speaking. Ms. Parker, this is Vanessa Morris, Executive Assistant to James Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood would like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. Emily straightened in her chair, earning a curious glance from her cubicle neighbor. May I ask what this is regarding? Mr. Blackwood prefers to discuss that in person. He's available today at 4 o'clock at his office, if that suits your schedule. Emily's mind raced. She'd been quietly investigating rumors of money laundering through offshore accounts among several Wall Street firms, including whispers about Blackwood Financial. Could Blackwood somehow know about her investigation? Or was this about their brief encounter at the wedding? 4 o'clock works, she heard herself saying. Excellent. The Blackwood building on Park Avenue. Security will be expecting you. At precisely 3:57 that afternoon, Emily stepped into the soaring lobby of the Blackwood building. Steel and glass stretched 58 stories into the Manhattan skyline, a monument to the power of the man who waited at its summit. After being escorted to the executive floor, Emily found herself in an office larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, its lush greenery a stark contrast to the steel and concrete that surrounded it. Ms. Parker, James Blackwood rose from behind a massive desk of polished walnut. Today, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his only concession to color a deep burgundy tie. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Curiosity is an occupational hazard, she replied, accepting his handshake. His palm was warm against hers, triggering an unwelcome memory of his touch at the wedding. Though I must admit I'm still curious about why I'm here. He gestured toward a seating area by the windows. Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink? No, thank you. Emily perched on the edge of a leather armchair, keeping her reporter's notebook visible on her lap. A small reminder that she was here in a professional capacity. James settled across from her, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. I have a proposition for you, Miss Parker. Another pretense? The words slipped out before she could censor them. To her surprise, he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his face. In a manner of speaking, yes, but more elaborate than our previous arrangement. I'm listening. The board of Blackwood Financial is concerned about stability. We're approaching a critical merger, and there's been talk about my personal life, or lack thereof. He straightened his already perfect tie. They feel I project an image of isolation that makes shareholders nervous. Emily raised an eyebrow. And what does that have to do with me? I need someone to accompany me to various functions over the next few months. Someone intelligent, presentable, and most importantly, discreet. You want me to be your, what, escort? His expression hardened. I want you to be my partner for public appearances. Nothing more, nothing less. Emily leaned back, studying him. Why me? Surely there are countless women in your social circle who would jump at the chance. That's precisely the problem. I need someone with no personal agenda, no connections to competing financial interests, and no illusions about this being anything more than a business arrangement. He paused. Your reputation for integrity preceded you long before we met. And what would I gain from this arrangement? Exclusive access. James leaned forward. You'll attend events closed to the press, meet people who never speak to journalists, see the inner workings of Wall Street's most exclusive circles. Emily's pulse quickened. The investigation she'd been quietly pursuing for months had hit wall after wall. Access like this could be invaluable, and if Blackwood Financial was indeed connected to the money laundering scheme she was tracking, what better way to gather information than from the inside? I assume there would be parameters, she said carefully. Of course. Nothing you see or hear during our arrangement can be published without my explicit approval. This would be entirely off the record. Emily allowed herself a small smile. That rather defeats the purpose of bringing a journalist into your world, doesn't it? Not entirely. After our arrangement concludes, I'm prepared to grant you an exclusive interview, the first in-depth profile I've given any publication in 5 years. Now that was a carrot worth considering. A Blackwood exclusive would be a career-making piece. How long would this arrangement last? 3 months, through the summer season. The merger should be finalized by September. Emily tapped her pen against her notebook, thinking. This was either the opportunity of a lifetime or a cleverly disguised trap. Perhaps both. I'd need assurances that my professional integrity wouldn't be compromised. Naturally, he withdrew a folder from his jacket. I've had my legal team draft an agreement that should address your concerns while protecting my interests. As Emily accepted the folder, their fingers brushed. A momentary contact that shouldn't have registered at all, yet somehow did. She skimmed the document, impressed despite herself by its thoroughness. I'll need time to review this properly, she said. Of course. Take 24 hours. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Though I should mention our first engagement would be this Saturday, the annual charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. At the door, he paused. One more thing, Ms. Parker. While I understand your journalistic instincts, I should make it clear that my private affairs are not up for investigation. Cross that line, and our arrangement ends immediately. His warning only confirmed what Emily already suspected. James Blackwood had something to hide. And now she might have the perfect opportunity to discover exactly what that was. The Metropolitan Museum of Art blazed with light against the deepening twilight. Emily stood at the top of the grand staircase, feeling simultaneously exposed and invisible among New York's elite. Her black gown, borrowed from the fashion department at the Journal, whispered around her ankles, its simplicity a deliberate choice amid the extravagant plumage of the city's socialites. You look beautiful, James's voice came from behind her, warm and low. She turned to find him impeccable in a black tuxedo, his expression unreadable as always. Thank you, she replied, accepting the compliment with the same professional distance with which it was offered. I see you survived your board meeting. A flicker of surprise crossed his features. How did you know about that? I'm a financial journalist, Mr. Blackwood. Keeping track of corporate calendars is part of my job. James, he corrected, offering his arm. If we're going to convince anyone that we're together, you should probably use my first name. As they entered the museum's grand hall, Emily felt the weight of curious glances. James Blackwood rarely attended such events, and never with a woman on his arm. Their presence together was already causing ripples of speculation. Remember, he murmured near her ear as they approached the first cluster of guests, you're not here as a journalist tonight. Then who am I here as? She whispered back. His hand pressed gently against her lower back. Someone who finds me irresistibly charming. Despite herself, Emily laughed. That might require acting skills beyond my capabilities. I have faith in you. A genuine smile softened his features, transforming him momentarily from the stern financial titan into someone almost approachable. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in high society navigation. James introduced Emily to bankers, politicians, and old money patriarchs with practiced ease. She noted how he skillfully redirected conversations when they veered toward business matters she might find too interesting, always maintaining the fiction that she was simply his romantic interest rather than a reporter gathering information. Near midnight, during a rare moment alone while James spoke with a senator, Emily slipped away to explore. The museum after hours held a special kind of magic, the exhibits illuminated but untouched by daytime crowds. She wandered into the American wing where her footsteps echoed against marble floors, finding inspiration among the masters. She turned to find Richard Hayes, Blackwood Financial's executive vice president, watching her from the doorway. Unlike James, whose presence commanded attention, Hayes cultivated an aura of deliberate invisibility, the kind of man easily overlooked until it was too late. "Just enjoying a moment of quiet," she replied, maintaining her cover. "These events can be overwhelming." Hayes approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Indeed, especially when one is thrust into unfamiliar territory." The implication was clear. He knew exactly who she was. "James has excellent taste," Hayes continued, standing uncomfortably close, though his sudden interest in a financial journalist has raised some questions. Emily met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't aware James needed to justify his personal choices to his employees." "Employee?" Hayes laughed softly. "James and I have been friends since Harvard. I know him better than anyone, which is why I find his interest in you so curious." "Perhaps you don't know him as well as you think." Hayes' smile tightened. "A word of advice, Ms. Parker. Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it with James. He's not the man you think he is." "And what man is that?" "One capable of genuine human connection." Hayes checked his watch. "Enjoy your evening, Ms. Parker. And do be careful. Investigative journalism can be such dangerous work these days." As he walked away, Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the museum's air conditioning. Hayes knew something. About her, about James, perhaps about both. His warning carried an undercurrent of threat that left her unsettled. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice James approaching until he was beside her. "Everything all right?" he asked, his expression concerned. "You disappeared." "Just needed some air," she replied, forcing a smile. "Your friend Richard Hayes was kind enough to keep me company." Something darkened in James's eyes. "Hayes is many things. Kind isn't one of them. He seems to think he knows you very well. He thinks he knows everyone and everything." James offered his arm again. "It's getting late. I'll have my driver take you home." As they descended the museum steps, a photographer called James's name. Without hesitation, he slipped his arm around Emily's waist and pulled her close, presenting the perfect image of a couple to the waiting cameras. "Sorry," he murmured against her hair. "Necessary evil." But as his warmth seeped through the thin fabric of her dress, Emily wondered who exactly was playing whom in this elaborate charade. And as the camera flashes illuminated them against the night, she couldn't ignore the unsettling possibility that she was no longer merely pretending to be drawn to James Blackwood. Back in her apartment that night, Emily pulled out the research she'd been gathering on suspected money laundering operations. Multiple financial institutions had been flagged for suspicious transfers to Cayman Islands accounts, but the evidence was circumstantial at best. Somewhere in this web of transactions and shell companies, she believed Blackwood Financial played a role. Perhaps not James himself, but someone within his organization. As she pinned a new article about Richard Hayes to her investigation board, Emily realized she now had an unprecedented opportunity to uncover the truth. But it would mean using her arrangement with James in ways he never intended, and risking not just their agreement, but potentially her career and whatever fragile connection was forming between them. The question was whether the truth was worth that price. The Hamptons shimmered in the July heat, ocean breezes carrying the scent of salt and privilege across manicured lawns. Emily stood on the terrace of James's beach house, watching waves crash against the pristine shoreline. 6 weeks into their arrangement, she had settled into a strange rhythm of public appearances and private discoveries. "Penny for your thoughts?" James emerged from the house carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. Emily accepted the drink with a smile. "I was just thinking that all of this," she gestured to the sprawling property, "seems at odds with the man who works 16-hour days and reads financial reports for fun. You think I don't enjoy luxury?" He leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I think you're comfortable with it, but not defined by it." She studied his profile against the ocean backdrop. "This house, for instance, it's impressive, but lacks the ostentation of your competitors' properties. No helicopter pad, no indoor basketball court. You've been researching my real estate holdings?" His tone was light, but Emily caught the flicker of wariness in his eyes. "Observing," she corrected. "That's what I do." In truth, she had been doing far more than observing. While accompanying James to charity events and business dinners over the past weeks, she had quietly gathered information, connecting dots that pointed increasingly toward financial impropriety within Blackwood Financial, though nothing yet implicated James himself. "The fundraiser starts at 7, James said, changing the subject. "Senator Markham will be there. He's been pushing for increased regulation of offshore banking." Emily's interest piqued. "And how does Blackwood Financial feel about that?" "Officially, we welcome transparency in all financial markets." His smile held a hint of irony. "Unofficially, it's complicated. Most things worth understanding usually are." James studied her for a moment, his expression softening. "You're not what I expected, Emily Parker." "Is that a compliment or a complaint?" "An observation," he replied, echoing her earlier word. "Most people I meet want something specific from me. Money, influence, connection. You're after something different." "The truth," she said simply. "Ah yes, the journalist's holy grail." He finished his tea. "Just remember that truth is rarely as clean or clear as we'd like it to be." At the fundraiser that evening, Emily charmed senators and CEOs with practiced ease, playing her role as James's companion, while remaining alert to conversations that might yield information for her investigation. When James was pulled into a discussion with political donors, she took the opportunity to circulate independently. She was examining a display of silent auction items when a voice spoke close to her ear. "Diligent as always, Miss Parker." Richard Hayes stood beside her, immaculate in summer whites that somehow emphasized rather than softened his shark-like demeanor. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. I make it a point to support the Senator's environmental initiatives." He gestured toward where James stood across the room. "Things seem to be progressing well between you and James." "How fascinating." Emily maintained her composure. "We enjoy each other's company." "Do you?" Hayes swirled his champagne. "I wonder what James would think if he knew you've been accessing company files during your visits to his office." Emily's heart stuttered, but her expression remained neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Please." Hayes's smile was all teeth. "The security logs show your visitor badge accessing the 46th floor last Tuesday, the records department. James's meeting ran long, giving you nearly 40 minutes unaccounted for." She had been careful, or so she thought. The documents she'd photographed contained signatures authorizing transfers to offshore accounts, signatures that didn't match the official records she'd obtained through public filings. "I got lost looking for the restroom," she replied calmly. "The building is quite large." "Indeed it is, easy to get lost." Hayes leaned closer, "especially when one is searching for things that don't concern them." Before Emily could respond, James appeared at her side, his hand coming to rest possessively at her waist. "Hayes, I see you found Emily." "Just catching up," Hayes replied smoothly. "She's quite the addition to our little circle." "Our circle?" James's tone cooled noticeably. I wasn't aware you considered yourself the arbiter of my personal relationships. Hayes raised his hands in mock surrender. Merely expressing appreciation for your excellent taste, old friend. He nodded to Emily. Enjoy your evening, and do remember what I said about getting lost. Some areas are restricted for good reason. As he walked away, James turned to Emily, concern evident in his eyes. What was that about? Nothing important, she lied, forcing a smile. Just making conversation. James didn't appear convinced, but before he could press further, they were interrupted by the senator's wife, pulling them into the swirl of the party once more. Later that night, as they drove back to James's beach house, Emily stared out at the darkened coastline, her mind racing. Hayes knew she was investigating, which meant she needed to move quickly before he could destroy evidence, or worse, convince James of her betrayal. "You're quiet," James observed, his eyes on the road. "Just tired," she replied. "It's been a long day." He reached across the console to take her hand, a gesture that had become increasingly natural over the weeks of their charade. "Emily, if Hayes said something to upset you—" "It's nothing," she insisted, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze before withdrawing her own. These moments of genuine connection were becoming dangerous, blurring the lines between her investigation and her growing feelings for a man who might be involved in serious financial crimes. Back at the beach house, Emily excused herself to the guest room she'd been assigned for the weekend. Once alone, she retrieved her laptop and reviewed the photographs she'd taken of the suspicious documents. The signatures authorizing transfers to Cayman accounts, purportedly James's, didn't match his actual signature on public filings. Either someone was forging his name, or James maintained different signatures for different purposes, neither scenario being particularly legal. A soft knock at her door startled her. She quickly closed her laptop before calling, "Yes?" James opened the door, but remained in the hallway, respecting the boundary of her personal space. "I thought you might want some tea before bed." "That's thoughtful. Thank you." She accepted the steaming mug, their fingers brushing in the exchange. He lingered in the doorway, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Emily, I want you to know that whatever Hayes might have implied, there are complexities at Blackwood that aren't always what they seem." Her journalistic instincts sharpened. "What kind of complexities?" For a moment, it seemed he might elaborate, might finally open the door to the truth she'd been seeking. Then his professional mask slipped back into place. "Nothing that should concern you," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Good night, Emily." As the door closed behind him, Emily felt a conflicting mixture of determination and regret. Whatever James was hiding, whatever role he played in the financial irregularities she was tracking, she was close to uncovering the truth. But for the first time since beginning this investigation, she found herself hoping that James Blackwood would emerge innocent, a hope that had no place in objective journalism. August descended on Manhattan with oppressive heat, the city's concrete canyons trapping warmth that lingered well into the night. In her apartment, Emily spread financial documents across her dining table, tracing the complex web of transactions that had become increasingly clear over the past 2 months. Her wall of evidence had grown substantial, photographs of documents from Blackwood Financial showing transfers to shell companies, banking records obtained through sources showing those same companies funneling millions into Cayman accounts. And most damning of all, signatures authorizing these transactions, signatures that forensic analysis suggested were not James's, despite bearing his name. The narrative taking shape pointed to a sophisticated money laundering operation within Blackwood Financial, one that James either participated in or remained willfully blind to. The final piece was connecting these transactions to their source. Where was this money coming from, and where was it ultimately going? Emily's phone buzzed with a text from James. "Dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss." Their 3-month arrangement was nearing its conclusion. The merger James had been concerned about was proceeding smoothly, their public relationship having provided exactly the stability the board had desired. In 2 weeks, their agreement would end, and Emily would need to decide what to do with the information she'd gathered. 8 o'clock at my place, she texted back, seizing the unexpected opportunity. With James in her apartment, she could gauge his reaction to direct questions without the buffer of his corporate environment. His response came quickly. "Perfect. I'll bring wine." Emily spent the afternoon preparing a simple meal, her mind rehearsing approaches to the conversation ahead. Direct confrontation would likely shut him down immediately. A more subtle approach might yield better results, perhaps starting with questions about Hayes, whose antagonism toward her had grown increasingly overt. At precisely 8 o'clock, her doorbell rang. James stood in the hallway holding a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite, though she couldn't recall ever mentioning this to him. "You remembered," she said, accepting both with genuine surprise. "You had them on your desk the first time I visited the journal," he explained, following her into the apartment. "I pay attention to details." So did she, which was why she had carefully tucked away her investigation materials before his arrival, leaving nothing visible that might alert him to her real purpose. Over dinner, a risotto that had turned out better than she'd expected, conversation flowed with the easy familiarity they'd developed. James seemed more relaxed in her small apartment than he ever did in his sleek office tower or expansive beach house, his tie loosened, his smile more frequent. "You mentioned there was something you wanted to discuss," Emily prompted as they moved to her small living room with the remainder of the wine. James nodded, suddenly serious. "Our arrangement ends next week." "It does," she agreed, setting her glass on the coffee table. "The merger is proceeding well, I take it?" "Very well. The board is satisfied. Shareholders are confident." He paused, studying her with unexpected intensity. "You've been perfect, Emily. More than I could have hoped for." "I'm glad I could help maintain the illusion," she replied carefully. "That's just it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not sure it's been an illusion, at least not recently." Emily's heart rate accelerated. "What do you mean?" "I think you know." His voice softened. "Somewhere between the Met Gala and weekends in the Hamptons, something changed. For both of us." She couldn't deny it, didn't want to deny it, despite the professional complications it presented. The James Blackwood she'd come to know was different from the cold financial titan portrayed in the press. He was thoughtful, occasionally vulnerable, possessed of a dry wit that caught her off guard. Time spent with him had become less performance and more pleasure. "James," she began, uncertain how to reconcile her growing feelings with her professional obligations. "There's something I need to—" Her phone rang, interrupting whatever confession had been forming on her lips. She glanced at the screen, an unknown number, and was about to ignore it when James gestured for her to take it. "It might be important," he said. Emily answered reluctantly. "Hello? Ms. Parker." Richard Hayes's voice sent a chill through her despite the summer heat. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "How did you get this number?" she asked, rising from the couch and moving toward the kitchen for privacy. "That's hardly relevant," Hayes replied smoothly. "What matters is that I've discovered exactly how thorough your investigation has been. Quite impressive, actually." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "I don't know what you're talking about. Let's not waste time with denials. I'm calling because I think we could help each other." His voice dropped lower. "Meet me at the Blackwood building in 1 hour. Garage level B. Come alone, and we can discuss an arrangement that benefits us both. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, James receives a comprehensive file detailing your activities over the past 3 months, including your unauthorized access to company records and the rather damning article I believe you're preparing to publish." Hayes paused. 1 hour, Ms. Parker. This is a one-time offer." The line went dead. Emily stood frozen in her kitchen, mind racing through possibilities. If Hayes was offering to meet, it likely meant he had something to hide. Perhaps he was the architect of the money laundering scheme, using James's name and position as cover. "Everything all right?" James called from the living room. Emily composed herself before returning. "Just a source with a potential lead. Unfortunately, I need to meet them tonight." Disappointment flickered across his features. "I understand. The news doesn't wait for personal conversations." "James, She hesitated, torn between warning him about Hayes and protecting her investigation. "Can we continue this discussion tomorrow?" He stood, straightening his tie in a gesture she'd come to recognize as his preparation for returning to the world. "Of course. Dinner at my place. 7 o'clock? Perfect." She walked him to the door, the weight of unspoken truths heavy between them. As his hand touched the doorknob, he turned back suddenly. "Emily, whatever you're working on tonight, be careful. Some stories carry more risk than others." There was something in his eyes. Concern, certainly, but also something else. Knowledge, perhaps. She wondered suddenly if James knew more about her investigation than he'd let on. "I'm always careful," she assured him, the lie bitter on her tongue. After he left, Emily moved quickly. She gathered essential documents supporting her investigation, backed up her files to a secure cloud server, and texted her editor a brief message. "Following important lead. If you don't hear from me by morning, check my research files." An hour later, she approached the Blackwood building, its illuminated spire piercing the night sky like a warning. The underground parking garage was nearly empty at this hour, her footsteps echoing against concrete as she made her way to level B as instructed. A single figure stood beside a black sedan in the far corner. Hayes, his expression unreadable in the dim lighting. "Miss Parker," punctual as always. "You said you had a proposition," Emily replied, maintaining distance between them. "I'm listening." Hayes smiled thinly. "Direct and efficient. I've always appreciated that about you." He opened the sedan's rear door. "Let's discuss this somewhere more private." Emily hesitated, every instinct warning against entering the vehicle. "I prefer to talk here." That wasn't a request. Hayes' smile vanished as a second man emerged from behind a concrete pillar, larger, expressionless, with the unmistakable bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket. "Get in the car, Miss Parker. Now." In that moment, Emily realized she had gravely miscalculated. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a trap. And as the second man approached, she understood that her pursuit of truth had led her into far greater danger than she had anticipated. Darkness gave way to dim light as a hood was removed from Emily's head. She blinked, disoriented, finding herself in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse space. Her wrists were bound to a metal chair, the zip ties cutting into her skin when she tested their strength. "Apologies for the theatrical approach," Hayes said, stepping into her field of vision. "But we needed to have this conversation without interruption." "Kidnapping a journalist is a federal offense," Emily replied, forcing steadiness into her voice despite her racing heart. "Not to mention incredibly stupid, perhaps. But allowing you to publish your little exposé would be far more costly." Hayes pulled up another chair, sitting across from her with casual ease. "You've been quite thorough in your investigation, tracking financial transfers, documenting forged signatures, connecting offshore accounts. Impressive work. If you know what I've found, then you know I have evidence of systematic money laundering through Blackwood Financial." Hayes smiled. "What you have is fragments of a much larger picture, one you've completely misinterpreted. Enlighten me then. James Blackwood is not the financial genius everyone believes him to be." Hayes leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "The company has been operating at a loss for years. Those transactions you tracked? That's money coming in, not going out. Without those funds, Blackwood Financial would have collapsed long ago." Emily studied him skeptically. "You expect me to believe James doesn't know his own company is failing? James sees what he wants to see. Quarterly reports I personally prepare, projections that match his expectations." Hayes shrugged. He trusts me implicitly, always has, since Harvard. So you're embezzling funds and blaming him, Emily concluded, using his signature to authorize illegal transactions. I prefer to think of it as creative financial management. Hayes checked his watch. In 3 days, the merger will be finalized. The acquiring company will discover the discrepancies eventually, but by then, the principals will have moved on with generous severance packages. James will face the legal consequences. His signatures are on all the relevant documents after all. And you walk away clean, Emily said, disgust evident in her tone. Precisely, Hayes stood. Which brings me to our current situation. Your investigation complicates things. The larger man who had helped abduct her stepped forward, handing Hayes a tablet. Emily recognized it as her own. They must have taken it from her bag. Fortunately, we've secured your research, Hayes continued, scrolling through her files, and your backup to the cloud server has been deleted. By morning, there will be no evidence of financial impropriety at Blackwood, just the unfortunate mental breakdown of a journalist who became romantically obsessed with a source. Emily strained against her restraints. No one will believe that. Your editor has already received emails from your account, expressing concerns about your growing fixation on James Blackwood. Very concerning communications, indicating you might be suffering from delusions about corporate conspiracies. Hayes smiled coldly. Your reputation for integrity works against you here. When a paragon falls, people are all too eager to believe the worst. The realization of how thoroughly Hayes had planned this sent ice through Emily's veins. He had anticipated her moves, countered her precautions, and was now systematically dismantling her credibility. James will know the truth, she said, grasping at her last hope. When he sees what you've done, James will be devastated by your betrayal, Hayes interrupted. Imagine his disappointment when he discovers the woman he was falling for was merely using him for a story and fabricating evidence against him in the process. He shook his head in mock sympathy. He might even believe you intended to blackmail him. It would explain why you kept your investigation secret all these months. The warehouse door opened with a metallic groan. Hayes nodded to his associate. Keep her secure. I need to finish arrangements for her transfer. Transfer where? Emily demanded, fear finally breaking through her professional composure. Hayes paused at the door. Somewhere you'll have ample time to reconsider your career choices, Ms. Parker. Don't worry, we're not monsters. You'll be released eventually once the merger is complete and the statute of limitations on certain activities has expired. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Consider it an extended sabbatical. As the door closed behind him, Emily surveyed her surroundings with growing desperation. The warehouse appeared to be in an industrial area, likely far from Manhattan. Her chair was bolted to the floor, the zip ties cutting deeper into her wrists with each attempt to free herself. The guard settled into a chair near the door, his attention focused on his phone. Emily tried another approach. You know he'll dispose of you too, right? She called to him. Once I'm gone, you're a liability. The man didn't even look up. Save your breath, lady. Hours passed in tense silence. Emily alternated between trying to loosen her restraints and preserving her strength. Sometime after midnight, the warehouse door opened again, but instead of Hayes, a different figure slipped inside. James Blackwood stood in the shadows, his expression thunderous as he surveyed the scene. Before the guard could react, James had crossed the space and rendered him unconscious with a precise strike that spoke of military training, an unexpected skill from a Wall Street executive. James! Emily's voice was a hoarse whisper of disbelief. He moved quickly to her side, producing a knife to cut through her restraints. Are you hurt? No, just sore and confused. She rubbed her wrists as circulation painfully returned. How did you find me? I've been tracking Hayes for months. James helped her stand, supporting her as her legs threatened to buckle. I knew he was embezzling, but I needed proof of where the money was coming from. When you didn't show up for our meeting this morning and weren't answering calls, I checked the security logs at the building. You knew about my investigation? Emily asked, leaning against him as they moved toward the door. Not initially, but I'm not blind, Emily. His arm tightened around her waist. The questions you asked, the interest in specific financial matters, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Why didn't you say anything? Because I needed you to find what I couldn't access myself. He checked the warehouse entrance before guiding her outside to where a car waited. Hayes has powerful associates. I suspected he was laundering money for some very dangerous people, but couldn't prove it without alerting him. As they drove away from the warehouse, Emily processed this revelation. So you used me, just like I was using you. James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not entirely true for either of us, is it? The question hung between them as they drove through the night, returning to Manhattan as dawn began to break over the skyline. Where are we going? Emily asked as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge. New York Presbyterian, James replied. You need to be checked for injuries, and we need to document what happened. Hayes will be arrested within the hour. I've already contacted the FBI with evidence of his activities. Evidence you gathered while I was conducting my own investigation, Emily concluded. We were working the same case from different angles. It would appear so. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We make quite the team, Ms. Parker. At the hospital, after being examined and giving statements to federal agents, Emily finally had a moment alone with James in her treatment room. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning light, looking both powerful and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Why did you really ask me to pretend to be with you at that wedding? She asked softly. The truth this time. James turned to face her, his customary mask of control finally absent. Because I'd read your work. Because you were the only financial journalist with both the intelligence and integrity to uncover what Hayes was doing without being compromised. He paused. And because, when you looked at me that night, you saw past the persona I've cultivated. No one does that. Emily studied him, the man she'd spent months trying to understand. A man who was both exactly what he appeared to be and nothing like his public image at all. What happens now, she asked. Now you write your story, the real story. Hayes's embezzlement, the money laundering operation he ran through my company, his attempt to frame me when the merger revealed his crimes. James approached her bedside. I'll give you that exclusive interview I promised, full transparency. And after that? Emily asked, the question encompassing far more than just professional considerations. James took her hand, his touch no longer part of any pretense. After that, Ms. Parker, I believe we have a conversation to finish, one that was interrupted in your apartment. About things not being an illusion anymore, she said, remembering his words from that night. Exactly. His smile reached his eyes this time, warm, genuine, hopeful, though I suspect we've moved well beyond pretending at this point. 3 months later, Emily's expose on the Blackwood financial scandal earned her a Pulitzer nomination. Richard Hayes and his associates faced federal charges for embezzlement, money laundering, and kidnapping. Blackwood Financial, under James's leadership, implemented unprecedented transparency measures that became the new gold standard for Wall Street. And on a crisp autumn day, at the Blackwood estate overlooking the Hudson River, Emily Parker and James Blackwood exchanged vows before a small gathering of friends and family. No pretense, no arrangement, no hidden agendas. Just two people who had found truth in the most unexpected of places. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, James whispered in her ear, "Not bad for a relationship that began with, 'Pretend you're with me.'" Emily smiled against his shoulder. "I'm not pretending anymore. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more captivating narratives like this one to life."